The first thing I should tell you is this. I never thought a toy could keep a promise. It sounds stupid when I say it aloud now, but the night it arrived, I felt as if the room itself inhaled and held its breath. I was alone in the house that week. My partner had left for her mother's funeral, the kind of absence that makes corners look guilty. And I found the doll tucked behind a stack of old magazines in the attic, wrapped in a yellowing handkerchief. Its eyes were wrong in a way I couldn't name at the time. Too large, rimmed in a rusty brown, glossy like halves of a coin. The face had hairline cracks that spidered across porcelain, and its dress smelled faintly of damp wood and mothballs. I remember thinking, absurdly, that someone had left it for me on purpose. The first nights were ordinary in the way only the beginning of something terrible can be, small noises that you translate as pipes or the house settling. I put the doll on my bedside shelf because I told myself I would return it in the morning. I always sleep with the lamp on for the first hour after a funeral. Light is a polite lie. The lamp hummed, the air tasted of coffee gone cold, and the faint metallic tang of grief. I fell asleep with the radio murmuring static. When I woke, the doll was facing the bed. I remember the precise angle of the head, the way its pupils sat like tiny, patient moons. I assumed I had placed it like that and forgotten. But the shelf was the only place I kept books, thin, neat rows that showed no disturbance. The doll's feet were balanced perfectly on the edge, a tiny gravity-defying thing. I reached for it and felt a coldness under my fingertips, a porcelain chill that made the hair on my arm lift. There was a smell then, like rain on hot asphalt and something older, vanilla mixed with iron, and it pooled in the base of my throat. The small oddities multiplied. A toothbrush left in the sink turned to face the mirror. A single page, torn from an old book, lay spread on the kitchen table, as if someone had read it. The house's clock stuttered at 3 in the morning for 7 nights in a row, the second hand stalling like a ragged breath. At first, I rationalized. Dreams, lack of sleep, the ache of fresh grief, making me see patterns where none existed. But patterns became messages. The toothbrush, the page, the clock. Then there were the sounds. Not footsteps, those I could have borne, but a soft scraping like nails on cardboard that came from the hallway outside my bedroom. It happened when everything else was absolved into the hush of night, when even the fridge softened to a single, remote breathing. I would hold my own breath and listen, convinced if I breathed it would hear me and stop. Sometimes the sound paused directly beneath my door and began a slow, meticulous circle. When I cracked the door an inch, the hallway was empty, but the doll on the shelf seemed to tilt its head ever so slightly, as though answering a question I had not dared to speak. I started to keep a notebook at my bedside. I wrote down times and smells and the smallest movements, like a border guard keeping a log for a kingdom that did not yet exist. The entries are ugly with fear. 3 a.m., clock stops. 3:07 a.m., scraping. 3:12 a.m., doll facing me. The numbers look sterile in ink, but the nights did not feel sterile. They felt close, like someone pressing their mouth to the other side of a wall and breathing my name. By the end of that first week, the house felt divided. Daylight became a mercy, and evening an accusation. I told myself I would get rid of the doll, burn the handkerchief, throw its eyes into the canal, but each morning it remained, patient and always watching. I would swear under my breath and leave it in the attic again, only to find it waiting on my shelf come nightfall, as if it had learned the quickest route through the dark. After the first week, the scratches and the clock and the doll's patient angles stopped feeling like coincidences. They started to feel deliberate, like someone rearranging the furniture of my nights to make space for them. I stopped pretending to be brave. I installed a cheap baby monitor in the hallway, the kind with a red LED and a speaker that hummed. I told myself it was for evidence, for proof to show my friends, to keep me anchored to reason. The screen offered a grainy grayscale of my own house, and at first it comforted me. The empty hallway, the crooked coat rack, the pale smear of moonlight through the curtains. The first sign was a photo. I woke one morning to my phone buzzing with a notification, a new image. I had not touched my camera. The thumbnail was black, a blurred smear. When I expanded it, my stomach dropped, a close-up of the doll's face, eyes reflecting the camera like twin planets. The timestamp read 3:14 a.m. I remember the time because I had written it in the notebook as a joke before I slept. 3:14, pi, circles. There was no logic. The image was on my phone, as if the doll had stepped into my pocket and pressed the shutter. I replayed the baby monitor footage. At 3:07, the screen went still, static like a held breath, and then after 7 seconds, the camera panned a fraction of an inch. Not because of wind, not because of a pet. There was nothing to justify that movement, but intention. The tiny red LED on the monitor had not moved. Whoever moved the camera had done it with careful hands and no light to show them. I rewound and watched the motion frame by frame until my eyes ached, until the hallway looked like a strip of film that had been tugged and stretched. Each small, deliberate motion made the world feel less like mine and more like a stage. Then the sounds began to layer. The scraping returned, now joined by the faint shuffle of fabric, the soft rasp of a dress across hardwood, then a whisper, so thin I thought at first it was the house flexing. It was not a word I could place. It was a breath shaped around consonants, like someone forming a name and swallowing it. I closed the window and the whisper leaked from the vents as if the house itself had learned to speak through seams. I started to lock doors, and still the doll appeared where locks meant nothing. I found it once in the pantry, perched among cereal boxes, its dress dusted with flour as if it had been standing there while I made coffee. Another night, I found it sitting at my dinner table, a tiny plate set before it with a ring of crumbs. Each time, the doll wore a different expression. Always the same eyes, but the tilt of the mouth shifted by degrees, as if practicing smiles it had observed on me. The notebook filled with more entries. 3:07 a.m., camera pan. 3:14 a.m., photo on phone. 3:22 a.m., whisper. The time spread like a map of a slow invasion. Friends suggested the obvious: stress, sleep deprivation, grief. But when I played back my voice memos from the nights I had sworn I was awake, my own voice trembled in ways it had not when I recorded things by day. On one file, my whisper echoes back to me, but layered beneath my voice is another softer cadence, a child's humming that I don't remember making. I listened until the hairs on my arms lifted. The humming wasn't a melody I knew. It was a nursery rhyme I couldn't place, one line ending with a consonant that clipped like a nail on glass. The most certain thing was this: the doll learned faster than I could plan. I set cameras. I moved the doll into sealed boxes. I left the house for whole afternoons to test whether it was following me. Each time I returned, the doll waited in a different room, always where I would see it first. On the stairs when I came up, on the sofa when I opened the door, like an answer to a question I hadn't realized I'd asked. One night, furious and beyond reason, I snapped a picture of the doll with the flash on. The image came out white and raw, but when I zoomed in, the eyes were different. No longer glassy reflections, but tiny, black pupils that seemed to hold other things. A smear that, when I squinted, looked like a child's handprint pressed into wet clay. That same night, I woke to the smell of something sweet and coppery, the perfume of forgotten candy and old blood. The house was dark. The diary on my bedside table had a new page, the ink wet and not my handwriting. A single sentence lay there in a small, careful script. I know the sound of your breath. By the time the words appeared in my notebook, I knew it wasn't just haunting me. It was studying me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed with every light on, the notebook in my lap, the doll on the shelf where it always seemed to return. Its glassy eyes glistened in the lamp glow, fixed on me with that endless patience. I told myself I would watch it until dawn, that if it moved, I'd see it. But sometime between the second and third cup of coffee, the air in the room grew thick, like standing inside someone else's lungs. My eyelids sagged under the weight of exhaustion. When my head finally dropped forward, I woke to a sound I will never forget. A single inhale, not mine, inches from my ear. The doll was gone from the shelf. I froze, too afraid to move, my heart hammering in my chest so loud it drowned out every other sound. Then, slowly, I forced myself to look down. At the foot of the bed, in the shadow where the lamplight failed, something stood. Its outline was wrong, too narrow, too still, and yet I knew. The smell of damp porcelain and mildew filled the air. I whispered into the dark, "What do you want?" My voice cracked. And then, for the first time, it answered. Not in words, but in a sound that rattled the walls. A dry, broken laugh, like a child choking on dust. The sound came from inside the doll's chest, but it shook the air around me, making the lamp flicker. The room grew colder. The floorboards creaked as if something heavier than its size pressed down on them. My notebook slid off the bed without my touching it, pages fluttering open on the floor. Every entry I'd written was smeared and overwritten with a single phrase, repeated over and over in black ink that smelled metallic and raw. You can't close your eyes. I ran. I don't remember how my legs carried me, but I stumbled through the hallway, into the living room, out the front door. The night air slapped my face, and for a moment I thought I'd escaped. The street was silent, washed in pale yellow light from the lone lamp on the corner. I didn't stop running until my chest burned. When I finally forced myself to look back at the house, the window of my bedroom glowed faintly. Behind the glass, a small shape stood. Thin arms, crooked head, teeth catching the light, watching. I never went back. I moved in with a friend, then another, then another. But the doll didn't stay behind. I started finding it again, sometimes on a kitchen chair, sometimes in the bathroom sink, once even in the passenger seat of my car. Always there before I realized it, as if it had traveled faster than me, as if it already knew where I would go. Now, I don't bother locking doors. It doesn't matter. It finds me every night. It doesn't need to scrape the walls or whisper through vents anymore. I feel it when I try to sleep, the weight on my chest, the smell of wet porcelain, the shallow rhythm of a breath that isn't mine. And I know, sooner or later, I'll open my eyes to find it sitting on my chest, smiling with teeth that weren't there before. Because the doll made me a promise, and it never, ever stops watching.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.